I mean, what happened between 1980 and the 1990s when you started writing your
Well,
own
okay.
work as a sorcerer?
Geez, well,
I realize you went to school, you went to graduate school. But obviously, where was
gaming
the
wise, gaming
yeah,
wise,
where was the gaming
let's
side?
look at the snapshots. In 1979,
Uh-huh.
I was a frustrated reader of D&D, and every time I got in a group and played, I didn't enjoy it very much. And I'm also, at that point, 14 turning on 15 during
Uh-huh.
1979. And I'm also changing my life dramatically because I have I've just gotten myself into the local private school
Oh,
through
gotcha.
scholarship.
Yeah, that's
And that
huge.
was
Yeah.
it was a very big deal because otherwise I would be a
Yeah.
townie pumping gas. And
Right.
so I'm doing a lot of big deal in life at this time. And I'm reading like a son of a bitch. And so I really was frustrated with Dungeons and Dragons as a thing, and the romance of being a D&Der was, frankly, it didn't really exist in the culture the way people think it
No.
did.
Yeah.
So and this is before the Satanic Panic. This has nothing to do with that.
Right. Oh, sure.
Everybody seems to think, well, D&D was big and hot and popular, and D&D was a thing, and then the Satanic Panic came and ruined it, and I'm like, this is not what happened for me.
Yeah.
So,
It was still pretty underground. Yeah.
and then so I was reading the Fantasy Trip and saying, if I play, this is going to be it. And I tried a couple of times, but frankly, again, I was still running into the whole: are we actually making anything like what I like?
Right.
And I was fascinated by the point buy concepts, and I was really interested, and I made up 10,000 characters and stocked 10,000 scenarios and played some
Yeah.
of it. Played
Sure.
some of it. And I kept my hand in. I kept looking at it, at role-playing stuff. I have a lot of original Gloranthan stuff because I kept thinking about it. And I didn't have that much money. So therefore, a
Sure.
purchase for me was always a painful choice of what I didn't
Right.
get. And, like the first MERP stuff came out, and the beautiful painted covers, for Middle-earth role-playing.
Oh,
Those
yes,
beautiful,
right.
beautiful painted covers. And I was like, do I really want to blow money on a painted cover when I'm really interested in that stuff? Because the Gloranthan stuff was fascinating me as content. That was the one place. That was the one place where I realized that the content was prized.
Right. It was bringing together the two things you love.
Right. And but of course,
with the role
right.
playing, yeah.
And so I was really interested in that when Stormbringer came out. So I bought it in 1981 when it came out, or 82. Went off to college and was determined to play Stormbringer. And so again, though, role playing was not this thing I did constantly. I didn't have this group,
Sure.
but I was saying there's got to be a way. And the love for the books is evident in the first edition of Stormbringer. It's very intense. It's got that Frank Brunner cover, the close-up of Elric's face and the sword.
Oh, right.
Just fucking awesome. And so I was really into it. Now, Ken St. Andre wrote it, which is unusual. He was writing a game for Chaosium.
Oh, yeah.
And the blend of St. Andre whimsicalness with Moorcock, with Chaosium's rather, shall we say, ska approach to combat.
Ska.
Society for Creative Anachronism, which heavily influenced the BRP
I was
system.
thinking of the music.
Yeah. No, sorry. Yeah, I was going to say that sounds kind of cool, actually.
It does,
but
really,
but that's not what I mean. I'm talking about the fumble tables and stuff like that. And so you do this, and I don't think it's a very beautiful blend. And the one thing that tends to fall down is all the Moorcockian stuff, but that's the stuff that I liked. The fact that you made up your demons.
Mm-hmm.
You made up the demons you summoned. It was a demon build, not a demon list, even though later books and supplements have demon lists. And of course, you can tell that stuck right in my head. That stuck hard, right? So I'm looking at Wizard, and it's simple point buy and really, really elegant mechanics. And I'm looking at the Stormbringer stuff, and I'm thinking about what I like to read, and I'm going, Yeah, but you can't. There's no fantasy role playing culture at this point. Anybody I met who was into D&D was really, really difficult person to deal with. Really, really didn't read the stuff that I read. The people that read the stuff that I liked, they all had done role playing and were done with it, like I was. And I said, this isn't happening. This medium, it's broken. It's not a thing. You can't do it. All you can do, and I remember one of the most brilliant women I've ever known, who, and this was in college, and she said, I don't need anybody to tell me what a dragon is. And I got to thinking about the Wizard of Earthsea, and I was like, you're right. You're not going to make the Wizard of Earthsea. You're not going to produce fantasy by playing D&D. It's not going to happen. Now, of course, on the one side of me, some piece of me, when she said that, said, yeah, but do games have to be like that?
Right.
But at the time, yes, a role-playing game it had a monster manual. Had to.
Right.
So anyway, I'm thinking about all this. Then Champions 3rd edition shows up, and it's totally fortuitous because I had sold off all my comics except for Conan back in 1978. I'd sold them off. All those wonderful comics that I had inherited from my brother, full range of early 70s Marvel, and I had been buying them too. So I had gone through the Warlock saga, right, episode by episode.
Sad.
And it's all gone, yeah. And so,
Your wife's getting that for you next Christmas, then. Right?
Actually, she did.
What?
Christmas
awesome.
later, well, she didn't get all of them, but what she did, she got me the collection of Panther's Rage.
Nice.
She must have gone and looked at my blog.
She's a smart woman.
Must have gone and looked at my blog. And that one issue of Marvel Premiere featuring Wood God, which is by far and away even more so than Man Wolf becoming a warrior, a sword and sorcery warrior on the moon. Okay. Even more than that. God? Wood God. And one of the most, the Marvel fan runs away from Wood God, covering their ears and says, "That's not canon." Okay. But yeah, you look up my post on my blog sometime.
I will.
Yeah,
I will.
And so the thing about this though is that I ran into some guys. I got to working at a children's center in Hyde Park, and very much, shall we say, a circumstance in which if you were white, you were going to have a thick hide and sensibilities that were not that common. Gotcha. And I, for whatever you want to call it or say it, I'm not, whatever it says about me, I fit right in. Okay. And I really enjoyed working there, and I worked there for years. Full-time in the summers, I really got into working at that place. And two guys who were hired, or one guy who was hired at the same time as me, and I bonded instantly. And there's these wonderful pictures, that are just so heartwarming of this, curly-haired, hippie California guy, and this black guy who had been, recruited for pro ball, and we were just about the same age, and we were just like, total buddies. And we worked there for years. And he was an artist and a comics guy. And I remember, we were hanging out after our first day on the job, and he was like, "You ever read any comics?" And he had another friend. That's why I said two guys. He had another friend who didn't work there, who was also an artist. And they had been reading all the Marvel comics that I had missed. Gotcha. Because the last issue of the Amazing X-Men that I had, the Uncanny X-Men, the last issue of the Uncanny X-Men that I had read was somewhere around 99.
99. 80, 79.
No, I'm talking about number 99.
Oh, number 99. Okay, right. I'm with you.
And so that meant that I had not read the Phoenix Saga.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. And I had missed Miller's Daredevil. I had missed Byrne's Fantastic Four. They had all these things in stacks.
Oh, for you to read it.
Yeah, and I just got shopping bags full of this stuff, right? This is before boards. They didn't have boards in boxes. Nobody had boards in boxes. And so, this massive wad of comics. And my friends and I, right, in college, the friends of mine that I had, we all just went, and just dove in and instantly realized the famous appeal to women of Claremont, right, what immediately became evident because all we had to do was leave out an issue on the coffee table. And, wham, every, there must have been like some kind of a concentric circle of comics reading expanding out from my room at that time.
Funny.
And so we just went bonkers. And so I'm totally enjoying reading this stuff. We're debating every last little thing, and I'm arguing, and we're having a great time. And this is right about 1985, so the new universe is being hinted at.
Right.
And 3rd edition Champions comes out. I just see it on a shelf, and not even in a game store. It was like in some toy / kind of a hip store for kids with weird toys and stuff like that. And there was 3rd edition Champions, and I bought it. It's cheap.
Yeah.
This is it right here. Same one.
Yeah. Very cool. Yeah. Once again, my brother gave mine away.
Painful. And it's incredibly fortuitous because that is the creme de la creme of 1st generation Champions, that particular book. And it was everything I wanted. Make it up. And the clarity of what to do, and with tons of emergent properties of the drama.
Did you recognize that from the reading 100%. In 1985?
100%. Yeah. We took one look at it, and I was like, holy shit, someone got it. Someone says, we do this role-playing thing to make the thing. Mm-hmm. There's no setting in 1st generation Champions.
Right.
It was Holmes all over again. And I went to my friends and said, did you guys ever do any role-playing? And we played the shit out of it.
That's awesome.
And then, the other friends that had said, yeah, I used to play D&D. I was like, hey, come check this out. And all the various female friends got in on it. And before you know it, you've got one of these groups that's like 12, 15 people with intermittent attendance and this huge bunch of stuff happening. And so I played the hell out of Champions for years and years and years. Cool. And we played other stuff too. I played a ton of GURPS. I played a ton of Cyberpunk, the first version. Mm-hmm. And no, it's not called 2013. It's called Cyberpunk is the name of the role-playing game. Just like there was this movie, this science fiction movie came out in 1977 or whenever it was, called Star Wars.
Right.
Period. Not the name of the movie.
Right. It was just.
Yeah. Sorry, just being a pain in the ass when I talk like that. I know. But what I'm talking about too is that again, there is no franchisee element of this. You weren't buying into a set of things that were to come out.
Right.
And so, which is funny to say for somebody who was into comics to say that, but anyway, a
comic is just a series, yeah.
And well, I came out, I also was fortunate enough to be turned on to First Comics, which was centered in Chicago at that time. You could actually walk past the offices of First Comics. And so I really, really liked a couple of those, and I got to know the authors. So within a very short period of time, I was buddying up and going to parties and stuff like that with people who were working for First Comics in DC.
That's really cool.
Right. So, I mean, I was like, kind of terrified in retrospect at how quick that was, because I've known a lot of fans who are friends of the writer, and they're always kind of kept at arm's length by the pros.
Right.
For whatever reason, I wasn't. And so, I mean, I'm reading like the boards of the original art before they're published. I'm looking at the scripts before they're published. People are, I'm actually talking and going, why are they tolerating me? I know how they talk about fans. They say what they think about fans in front of me. Why? why am I here? And so anyway, I'm living the dream if you think about it, right? I'm playing the shit out of champions with women and people of all these different backgrounds, right? We're not just a bunch of college kids. I'm playing, GURPS. This is before GURPS Supers. But we were playing GURPS like with comics creators, and stuff like that. So cool. I'm having all this interesting time. And so that's how I got back. That's when I said, yeah, I'm a role player. That's when I started looking people in the eye. After I graduated from college, I'm working at the Field Museum, and I'd pull out my copy of Champions and start working on characters, during lunch. And somebody said, what's that? And I'd say, it's a role-playing game. I do this, and it's cool, and it's fun. and all this was, I think, where I really sort of embraced it, and where I started saying, let's start working on this mechanically. You can start finding my designs going back to about 1987 in notebooks. They're just written. But it's stuff we would play. We would actually play stuff that I, kind of designed, whether it was we played the hell out of Rollmaster too, out of all things. And so you can see there's a lot of experimental play going on. I'm looking at different ways that characters are constructed. I'm looking at different ways. My first idea out of all of this was currency.
Is that right?
Yeah, my thoughts on currency came out of it.
Mechanic. Gotcha.
Right. And so
Champions is big on currency, isn't it?
Right. So, well, that's what interested me, though, was I realized that it was happening in all the games in certain ways, regardless of whether it was an explicit point buy or point situation or not. What's also interesting is that both GURPS, but especially DC Heroes, the points build the whole universe. Well, point is a Lego, right? In Champions, first generation
the APs
Champions.
in DC are heroes. Absolutely. They're everything. Yeah.
Yes. In Champions, that's the case with 4th edition on. It's not the case for first generation at all.
Right.
And so I got to thinking, well, if it's not like DC Heroes, then what are those points doing? Right. We're not building the world with points. So what are they?
Right.
So anyway, that's sort of the saga there. My first ideas for Sorcerer specifically came from hacking Cyberpunk.
Okay.
And I also have my version, my hack of Wizard. I said, ultimately, much as I said I loved the fantasy trip, and the Labyrinth and that role-playing game, and always referred to it as the one that I really valued the most. Every time I go back to it, I don't like what they did with Wizard.
Interesting.
I'm going to go back to Wizard. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to see, and so I started playing, by the early 90s, I'm playing my hack of Wizard.
Oh, gotcha.
And I'm also frustrated. I mean, another thing I did was I was trying to redo Rollmaster in some kind of way, and I was realizing I don't want to go down that road. Mm. I got really, really sick in 1992. First major illness of my entire life, because I was grossly hippie healthy before that. And so I got incredibly sick in 1992. This is in grad school.
Yeah.
And I had transferred down to Gainesville, and I was writing essays for zines about Champions, and I was playing the shit out of Champions and playing other games too, and getting my master's and all that. Well, I got heinously sick with chickenpox at the age of 27. Mm. And the same year the vaccine came out.
Wow, just missed that one, huh?
Yeah, literally, almost by weeks. And so, and when a vaccine first comes out and you're 27, it's not like you would run off to go get it, right? It's not on your mind.
No, you would think I made it this far. I don't need that. Yeah.
Well, and even so, I mean, it's not like the news came out. I wasn't in the venues where people were reading that kind of news. So I hadn't been to a doctor. I didn't have a doctor. So anyway, I ran off and got heinously, grossly, almost life-threateningly sick. And for a long time after that was physically very shattered. Mm. And that's when I actually watched movies in a dedicated way for the first time in my life. And that's also when I really found myself playing a lot more solo games.
Oh, sure.
So I was playing the hell out of fighting fantasy. I'd always loved, the Seven Serpents books. Mm-hmm. Who doesn't? And
yeah, I've never read or played them.
Oh, wow. Okay. Well, they're a gem. They really are a gem of solo play. And what fascinated me was how much fun I had in fantasy adventure with these really simple 2d6 rolls without any of the other stuff. And then I went back and read Wizard again, and I was like, wow, you can really do something when all you have are these numbers where the number is the number. There's no derived value.
Right.
The number is the number, and that's what you do, and we're good. So I started really getting much more into thinking about play that way. That's just about when Over the Edge came out. Mm-hmm. And that summer of being sick. And I also was displaced because I actually had gone back to Chicago to live there for the summer.
Oh, gotcha.
So I was doing research at the Field Museum, and I was, living in a friend's apartment, and I was, and I played Champions with a bunch of people there too. And you know what? It sucked. We really had a terrible time. And I had to say to myself, why did we have a bad time with my favorite game?
Yeah.
So here I was, and I was reading Over the Edge. And that's when I started putting together my notes for a different game. I thought about, is this going to be a sword and sorcery game, which is the original Sorcerer had been with Cyberpunk, had been all sword and sorcery. Right. And I said, what am I going to do? And I thought about it, and I said, I'm going to go back to that sorcerer idea with the demons, because that's where the juice is. Right. This is really speaking to me. And the other media that I was into at the time also spoke to me. This is when I wrote the original Circle of Gray Magic, which later became Circle of Hands. Gotcha. Right? And you can see that it's a wonderful, the DNA is the fantasy trip with a ton of Magic the Gathering. Because I was playing the hell out of Magic the Gathering just a year later.
Yeah.
So, So you can see this was all kind of coming together. And I then started talking about system as a thing. Mm-hmm. And it would become clear to me how much published role-playing design was imitative. And I had a broad enough background that I could see that this, that, and the other were basically just mining and throwing it in. And I had been very, very disappointed. Speaking of birthdays and holidays and gifts, somebody had gotten me Vampire the Masquerade as a birthday gift when it came out. And I had run face first.
Immediately?
Well, I was just like everybody else. I was completely charmed by the fact that it took itself seriously as an artifact. And the art in that first edition was much more down and dirty and much more comics oriented. Remember they had that story running along the bottom in the comics pages?
I have never... Oh, yeah. No, I've never seen Vampire. I've never actually looked at a version of Vampire.
Well, and the first part is very, very exciting about how we're going to call it a saga. And I was very excited because I had written a fantasy game that I called Bullshitless. That the first thing it did was say, we're not going to say campaign. There isn't a campaign. We're going to make a saga. And so I was like, oh, these guys, they said saga. Ooh. And so it was all about like the character and the drama and all the rest of it. And I was like, maybe. And then I hit the system and I was like, that's not going to do it. Right. That's not going to do it. And so, generally, and the whole push toward LARPing too. I was like, okay, if you want to do that, but no, I think these things work,
right,
in a way that works. It's not, the whole idea that the dice are a desperation device or a holdover from wargaming and stuff like that. No, I was pretty convinced that back then, pieces here and there, stuff we'd tried with Champions especially. We got story that we didn't write. We wrote it or made it. Sure. That was the writing. So how did that happen? And how come it didn't work sometimes and did work others? Really.
Right.
And so it was right about that time when I started to put together Sorcerer. The first playable draft was in 1994. Wow. And then the first published version is 1996. That's when I put it on the internet.
Yeah.
So, early adopter, right? And so, I would. So, does that help a little bit with the sort of impacts and ups and downs and stuff?
Interesting arc, yeah, absolutely. That's really interesting.
But I noticed that I was at my best when I was also dealing with people who were creative professionally at the same time.
That makes perfect sense.
Right. And so because I was real interested in how you make it the fiction, not in how I never got into the role-playing game as a franchise product of something else you liked. And that's not just for licensing either. You have plenty of games that aren't licensed that are that. So like Vampire relative to Anne Rice is a very good example.
I see what you're saying.
So I don't know. I mean, that's the arc is fairly clear to me, but it is also curiously divorced from gamer culture as well.
Well, sure, because it's, I mean, which is probably why you have so many visions about this, because you were coming at it from that other side of art creation. It makes a lot of sense. And then having to think analytically about why one game, the same game, sucked here, was awesome here.
Right. And you couldn't say it was because the game master was good, because the game master was the same guy.
Right.
Operating from the same ambitions.
The players suck.
No, they didn't. Exactly. They didn't. They were there for the same reasons. So what was wrong?
Yeah.
Well, I found, and then, it can go on. It was sometime in 1997. In fact, I know this for a fact. It was in 1997 where a friend of mine, whose name shall live in infamy, said, there's some people talking about something called the threefold on the internet. You should check that out.
Is that... Oh, that's interesting. I didn't realize that. Oh, did we get disconnected?
Just for a sec, but you didn't realize which exactly.
That you had been brought to the threefold theory and then built from there. I don't know why I was thinking it was sort of like concomitant,
Oh, I see. Right.
In my head. Mm-hmm.
No, at first I thought I was just I was just working with what they said. Right. It was very quickly I realized that I actually disagreed with them about something pretty important. But by then I was talking all about it on, the Gaming Outpost and so on. And so the internet went and got me. But you see, but this is the important point. I was already selling Sorcerer when I started talking about that stuff or thinking about it.
Right, of course.
I was already designing. So,
and from Sorcerer from 94 to 96 to 97, did it change a lot in that time? Or at 94 was the DNA mostly the same?
Yeah, the DNA was mostly there. The three characteristics, basically using Over the Edge as the base model for the creativity, using the fantasy trip, and this is real straightforward because the fantasy trip uses a 3x6 system. And I basically just turned the how am I going to put this? I basically just turned the there is a conversion there that's actually fairly easy to see once you check it out, because I was interested in using you can use the dice in Sorcerer as they're units, right? The die is the unit, not the values, and so therefore you will find a very interesting collapse of the values in the fantasy trip into the units of Sorcerer. The conversion is very clean.
Gotcha.
So and of course I was playing that hack of the fantasy trip, of Wizard, the whole period. Right. So these things are fairly straightforward, but I also was talking about Sorcerer on the internet, making it available, looking around for this cornucopia of weird little games that people were posting, like on GeoCities, right? Sure. And I definitely can see right there, where I springboarded into, Adept Press. But the way it came together had a lot to do with being